Welcome to the Dep Dive. Today we're going straight into the heart of Bitcoin decentralized finance, or DeFi.
Yep. And our source for this is a really great conversation, actually. It's with Alexei Zamyatin, co-founder of Bob from Epicenter Podcast, episode 589. And our goal today is pretty straightforward. We want to give you a clear picture, cut through the noise,
Yeah, focus on what it really takes to get DeFi working on Bitcoin, the challenges, the potential breakthroughs.
Exactly. Because it's not simple.
No, it really boils down to this core tension, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've got Bitcoin, super secure, widely adopted, the original digital asset.
The bedrock.
Right. But then its actual functionality for things like complex finance. Well, it's limited compared to chains like Ethereum.
Especially for DeFi, yeah. So how do you bridge that gap? How do you bring that DeFi power to Bitcoin without breaking what makes Bitcoin special?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, I suppose. Let's dive in.
Okay, so this brings us to what you might call the Bitcoin DeFi paradox. You have Bitcoin, right? Foundational digital asset, massive community, super distributed. It's the decentralized money.
Couldn't agree more. But here's the twist, the kicker, really. If you're holding Bitcoin and you want to do something more than just, well, hold it or send it, maybe some lending, borrowing.
Yeah, typical DeFi stuff.
Where do you often end up? Back on a centralized exchange, maybe a custodian platform. It feels disconnected.
It really does. It highlights this huge pent-up demand, People want to do more with their Bitcoin, essentially.
So it makes you wonder, and this is a question for you, the listener, if Bitcoin is all about decentralization, why is so much of its DeFi potential locked up or at least accessed through these centralized services?
It's a genuine puzzle that points to some real hurdles.
So what are those hurdles? Why has building DeFi directly on Bitcoin been so, challenging?
Well, for starters, there's the technical side. Bitcoin's scripting language. Yeah. It's powerful for secure transactions, absolutely.
But it wasn't really built for the kind of complex smart contracts and state management that, say, Ethereum DeFi relies on.
Exactly. It's intentionally limited in some ways
to
preserve that security, which means historically you've needed ways to kind of take Bitcoin elsewhere.
Which brings us to bridging.
Right. You need to bridge your Bitcoin onto other blockchains, like Ethereum, where the DeFi action is happening. It's like needing an adapter, basically.
And how have those bridges usually worked? The main way, so far at least.
Mostly it's involved depositing your Bitcoin with a custodian. So you're trusting a third party.
Like sending your Bitcoin to an exchange, almost.
Kind of, yeah. In return, you get a token representing your Bitcoin on the other chain, like WBTC wrapped Bitcoin or maybe CBTC on Ethereum.
But the core mechanism there is custodial wrapping. You're trusting someone else holds the actual Bitcoin backing that token.
And that's the main downside, isn't it? It introduces centralization, and with that comes security risk.
Yeah, definitely.
Most of these bridges rely on multi-signature setups. A group holds the keys. It's meant to spread the risk,
but it's still a potential point of failure if enough of those key holders collude or get compromised.
Exactly. And sadly, we've seen bridge hacks happen. Big ones. And that really damages user trust, understandably.
Plus, even putting the security risks aside for a second, the user experience.
Yeah.
It hasn't always been smooth sailing, has it?
Not really. You're faced with all these different bridges, each with its own interface, its own risks you need to try and figure out.
It's pretty fragmented. Compare that to doing DeFi directly on Ethereum, where things often feel more, integrated.
Yeah, the user experience gap is real. On Ethereum, you've got aggregators, protocols that often just work together seamlessly. With Bitcoin bridging, that first step, choosing and using a bridge, adds a layer of complexity and, frankly, anxiety for users.
It reminds me, thinking way back to my early crypto days, messing with Namecoin, merge mining. Even back then, it was becoming clear that Bitcoin's core design wasn't really set up for complex smart contracts like Ethereum was aiming for.
Right.
And that realization, I think, is what really kicked off the search for layer 2 solutions, better bridging, ways to extend Bitcoin's capabilities.
And that search is leading to some really interesting new ideas, which brings us to something generating a lot of buzz right now, BitVM.
Okay, BitVM. Let's unpack this because it sounds potentially huge. It's being framed as a totally new way to enable DeFi-like things on Bitcoin, crucially, without needing to change the Bitcoin protocol itself.
That's the key point. No Bitcoin hard fork needed. But first, it's really important to get this clear. BitVM is not a virtual machine like the EVM on Ethereum.
Right, so it doesn't execute code in the same way. What's the core idea then? How does it work?
The central concept, as Alexei Zamyatin puts it, is defrauding proof of Bitcoin. It sounds a bit dramatic, maybe,
A little.
but it's essentially a clever cryptographic setup. It allows complex computations that happen off-chain to be verified on the Bitcoin blockchain using something called fraud proofs.
Okay, fraud proof. So it's like proving someone cheated.
Exactly. Instead of needing to trust someone up front to run the computation correctly, you set it up so that if anyone tries to cheat, it can be proven publicly on Bitcoin itself. It's a challenge response system.
Got it. Because technically, you could try and do complex stuff directly with Bitcoin script, right? Like Alexei mentioned, maybe a multiplication program.
You could try, but it would be unbelievably inefficient. You'd use up so much block space, so much computational effort for even simple things. You might only fit a tiny calculation in a whole block. It's just not practical.
So BitVM gets around that inefficiency.
Yes.
Yeah.
It breaks down the big, complex computation like running a bridge or another DeFi protocol into lots of tiny subprograms. Operators who run this off-chain system make commitments on the Bitcoin blockchain about what they're doing.
Commitments. Like promises.
Sort of, yeah. Cryptographic promises about the computation steps. And here's the clever part. If an operator tries to pull a fast one, say, steal funds from a bridge, anyone watching can issue a challenge on the Bitcoin blockchain. This forces the operator to reveal specific steps of their computation.
And if they cheated?
The fraud-proof mechanism kicks in. The challenger can prove, using just standard Bitcoin transactions, that the operator's result was wrong.
Wow. So the security model is different from multi-sig bridges then?
Massively different. With multi-sig, if enough signers collude, the funds can be stolen. With BitVM, the theory is, even if almost all operators are dishonest and colluding, as long as there's one honest participant who can issue that challenge within the time window, the funds are safe. The fraud can be proven and prevented on Bitcoin itself.
Okay, that sounds much more aligned with Bitcoin's security principles. How does that challenge actually play out on-chain? What does the challenger do?
They initiate a specific type of Bitcoin transaction, the challenge transaction. This basically puts the accused operator on the clock. They have a set time frame, maybe a few days, to respond.
And the response involved?
They have to reveal the intermediate steps or results of their off-chain calculation, posting specific data onto the Bitcoin blockchain.
So they essentially have to show they're working step by step in public.
Exactly that. They have to show their work. And if they tried something fishy, like changing the destination address on a bridge withdrawal to steal the money, the challenger can examine those revealed steps, find the exact point where the math went wrong or the data was manipulated.
And then, how does the proof stop the theft?
The challenger takes that specific incorrect subprogram step and executes it within a Bitcoin transaction. Because of the operator's initial commitments on-chain, this proves definitively that the operator lied about the computation's outcome.
And all Bitcoin nodes can see this?
Yes. Every Bitcoin full node can verify this fraud proof using standard Bitcoin rules. It invalidates the operator's attempt to misuse the funds. Essentially, BitVM lets Bitcoin act as the ultimate referee for these off-chain systems.
That is genuinely clever. Now, Alexei also mentioned ZK proofs, zero-knowledge proofs. Where do they fit into the BitVM picture?
Right, so the ZK proofs are used more as a pre-processing step. Think of it like standardizing the computation before you even start breaking it into little pieces for BitVM.
Okay, so it helps structure the calculation.
Exactly. It creates a uniform way to represent the computation. He mentioned the initial ZK verifier code was quite large, like a gigabyte, which is way too big for Bitcoin.
Yeah, that wouldn't work.
So they're working on chunking it down, breaking that verifier into smaller pieces, maybe around 400 kilobytes each, that are more manageable for the BitVM process.
Makes sense. What about the costs, though? Putting data on Bitcoin, especially for these challenges, that can get expensive, right? Bitcoin fees aren't always cheap.
That's a really important practical point. Alexei talked about a few ways this could work. One idea is that operators running these systems might need to put up a Bitcoin deposit, like collateral.
So if they get caught cheating.
The deposit could be used to pay the challenger's transaction fees, creating a strong incentive to be honest and compensating the person who found the fraud.
Okay.
Other possibilities include crowdfunding challenge transactions if needed, or building fees into the Layer 2 protocol itself to cover potential security costs.
And does the security approach scale well? If lots of value is being secured.
That's one of the neat aspects. The relative cost of security of those potential challenge fees actually goes down as the total value locked, TVL in the system, goes up.
Oh, so?
Because the cost amount of challenge is relatively fixed, while the potential payoff from a successful attack grows with the TVL. This makes attacks economically unattractive very quickly. The incentives are designed to make honesty the profitable strategy.
So where is BitVM now? Is it live? Is it just an idea?
It's moving fast. It's definitely past the pure idea stage. BitVM-powered bridges are already running on testnets.
Okay, so people are building with it.
Yes, live prototypes have been demonstrated. Alexei mentioned expecting a wider rollout of these kinds of bridges during 2025, so it's becoming real.
Right, 2025, that's not far off. Okay, BitVM sounds like it could really change the game for Bitcoin DeFi. Now let's talk about Bob, the project that Alexei co-founded. How are they actually using BitVM and other tech to build this Bitcoin DeFi future?
So Bob is positioned as a hybrid layer 2 solution. The whole focus is making Bitcoin the core asset for DeFi.
Hybrid. What's that mean in practice?
It means it's combining a few different things. It aims to inherit Bitcoin's security using different methods that evolve over time. It's also compatible with the Ethereum virtual machine, the EVM, using the OP stack.
So developers familiar with Ethereum can build on it easily.
That's the idea. And crucially, it's designed from the ground up to have native bridges, not just to Bitcoin, but also to Ethereum and potentially other blockchains too.
Okay. And Alexei laid out a roadmap, didn't he, in phases?
Yes, a 3-phase plan.
Yeah.
Phase 1 is where they are now, basically. Bob is operating as an Ethereum rollup.
An optimistic rollup using the OP stack.
Correct. And the focus in this phase is really on building the product, nailing the user experience for Bitcoiners in DeFi, offering things like one-click deployments, and introducing concepts like their Hyper BTC vaults.
Hyper BTC, yield-bearing Bitcoin.
Yeah, representations of Bitcoin that can earn yield within the Bob ecosystem, even in this initial Ethereum-focused phase.
Okay, so that's phase 1. What about phase 2? He mentioned 2025 for that too, I think.
Right. Phase 2 is a pretty big step up. Bob plans to transition to become a ZK rollup, still on Ethereum, but using zero-knowledge proofs for efficiency and privacy.
Okay, ZK rollup. And what else?
This is where it's really interesting for Bitcoin integration. Phase 2 incorporates Bitcoin staking.
Bitcoin staking, how does that work?
Through an integration with another project called Babylon, it allows Bitcoin holders to essentially stake their BTC to help secure the Bob rollup.
So you lock up your Bitcoin somehow?
Yeah, you lock it up cryptographically, and in return, you help validate the Bob rollup's state transitions on Ethereum. This adds another layer of security rooted directly in Bitcoin's economic weight and helps Bob achieve faster finality for its transactions.
Wow, okay. So the Bitcoin stakers are actually verifying the ZK proofs that Bob submits to Ethereum.
That's the concept, yeah, merging Bitcoin staker validation with the Ethereum ZK proof checks. And importantly, phase 2 is also when they plan to activate the BitVM bridge we talked about.
Ah, okay. So the secure, trust-minimized Bitcoin bridge comes online in phase 2 alongside Bitcoin staking and the ZK rollup tech.
Exactly. It's a major upgrade, integrating Bitcoin much more deeply.
And then looking even further out, what's the vision for phase 3?
Phase 3 is the ultimate goal, really. It's for Buck to become a full Bitcoin rollup.
Meaning?
Meaning it would use BitVM for its fraud proofs and post all its transaction data directly onto the Bitcoin blockchain itself, not just relying on Ethereum.
So truly settling on Bitcoin.
Yes, but as Alexei himself pointed out, right now that's probably too expensive because of Bitcoin's transaction fees for data posting. It's more of the long-term vision. The goal is eventually having these native bridges to lots of chains, all ultimately secured by Bitcoin's verification power.
Fascinating. He also mentioned Bitcoin liquid staking derivatives, LSDs, things like Lombard Bitcoin. How do they fit into this ecosystem, especially maybe with BitVM?
Right. LSDs are another piece of the puzzle. Now, it's important, as Alexei noted, that current implementations like Lombard Bitcoin are often custodial.
Okay, so still involving trust.
In their current form, yes. But the idea of LSDs is powerful for Bitcoin DeFi. They let you earn staking rewards, perhaps via systems like Babylon, while still having a liquid token representing your staked Bitcoin that you can use in DeFi protocols, lending, borrowing, whatever.
So it unlocks liquidity.
Exactly. And the exciting potential here is integrating these LSDs with BitVM. Imagine a future where you have a non-custodial BitVM secured representation of your staked Bitcoin.
So a token that's securely bridged and earning staking yield.
Precisely. That could be a really powerful primitive for Bitcoin DeFi, combining security, liquidity, and yield in a trust-minimized way.
Okay, zooming out then, the big picture. What's the actual potential size of Bitcoin DeFi? Alexei sounded really bullish.
Oh, absolutely. The potential is, well, immense. If you look at the total value locked, the TVL, in Bitcoin DeFi today.
Yeah.
It's tiny compared to Bitcoin's overall market cap.
Right, much smaller than the ratio you see for Ethereum DeFi relative to ETH's market cap.
Exactly. It's a fraction of a percent right now. Alexei threw out numbers suggesting potential growth of maybe 100 times, even up to 300 times the current size.
Wow. 100x to 300x. What makes him think that kind of growth is possible? What are the drivers?
It's a confluence of factors, really. First, just improving the user experience, making it easier for average Bitcoin holders to participate.
Yeah,
that's key.
Definitely.
Then, having more secure and robust DeFi options, which is where technologies like BitVM come in, that builds trust.
Makes sense.
Then there's growing institutional interest in Bitcoin and potentially in using it productively beyond just holding. And fundamentally, there's just this huge untapped demand from the massive base of Bitcoin holders who want to do things with their Bitcoin decentrally.
It really does feel like if Bitcoin DeFi can get the security and UX right, it could be a massive catalyst. It could bring a whole new wave of users and capital into the broader DeFi space.
I think that's a very real possibility. Bitcoin has the brand recognition, the distribution, the narrative. If it becomes a major DeFi platform, that could genuinely push DeFi towards more mainstream understanding and adoption.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to recap our deep dive today, we've looked at why Bitcoin DeFi has been difficult, the problems with the early bridging solutions.
The centralization risks, the UX challenges.
Right. And then we really dug into BitVM, this potentially revolutionary approach using fraud proofs on Bitcoin itself to secure off-chain computations.
And how that enables much more secure, trust-minimized ways to bridge Bitcoin and build complex applications.
We also explored Bob, Alexei Zamyatin's project, and their phased approach starting as an Ethereum rollup, moving to ZK proofs with Bitcoin staking via Babylon, activating a BitVM bridge.
And their long-term vision of becoming a full Bitcoin rollup, aiming to leverage Bitcoin security and EVM compatibility.
And we touched on the huge potential for growth here. Bitcoin DeFi's current TVL is just scratching the surface compared to Bitcoin's market cap.
Yeah, the opportunity seems significant, and it could really reshape the whole crypto landscape if it takes off.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Imagine a future where a truly robust, decentralized financial system is built, anchored by the unparalleled security of the Bitcoin network itself. What new possibilities, maybe even new challenges we haven't thought of might arise from that?
That's a big question.
It is. We definitely encourage you to look more into BitVM, keep an eye on projects like Bob, and just generally follow the evolution of Bitcoin Layer 2s. Feels like a really exciting time for Bitcoin innovation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.